Hey everybody, I hope that you're doing well today. There are a few games that I think have largely gone underappreciated, and today I want to talk about one of them from what I would think of as maybe the golden age of MMOs, and that is, of course, Star Wars: The Old Republic. And this game is still it's still going on. You can still play it, obviously. It's quite old at this point. The graphics are somewhat dated and were never really cutting edge even when it first came out. The combat engine again is a bit dated, but in fact I would say it was largely in terms of its play style, its combat, its crafting, a lot of things like that. It's probably pretty much a sort of a Star Wars-ish clone of World of Warcraft. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. World of Warcraft was certainly a great game in the day, and a lot of people would argue that it still is. And although it has some flaws, I still think there's a lot of fun to be had in it. And I think the same thing can be said for Star Wars: The Old Republic. So what I wanted to kind of get into here in this video is basically why I think that this game is underappreciated, why I think that it's still a fun game today, and why I think if you haven't played this game for yourself, I think you should do yourself a favor and go through and play it. And really, when it comes down to it, the main reason why is because I think that Star Wars: The Old Republic is storytelling at its very best in terms of video games. So what do I mean by that? I think that a lot of us tend to get bogged down in sort of the engine of games. We get, I should say, we tend to focus on things like, the graphics, maybe the how dynamic the combat system is. And those things are certainly important. I don't mean to suggest otherwise, but when it comes down to it, whether we're talking about MMORPGs, whether we're talking about ARPGs, whether we're talking about CRPGs, there's a common denominator here, and that's the RPG part. These are role-playing games, and basically games are largely an escape from reality, right? They are a simulation of reality to a certain extent that put us in the role of the protagonist of our own stories. And I think that some games, I'm not going to mention names here, but some games are really, really good at the other stuff, and they kind of don't really put enough emphasis on the storytelling. And I realize that there's, this is subjective. There's some people that would put storytelling as a secondary priority for a lot of their games, and that's perfectly fine. There's no right or wrong way to play games. But for the most part, I think if you're playing a role-playing game, you're playing it for the theme, right? You're playing it for that escape from reality where you can basically be the hero of your own story. And so for that reason, I think the storytelling is certainly quite important. I think it sometimes gets overlooked in terms of how we evaluate games. Not always, but sometimes it does. So let's talk about what this game does right in terms of storytelling. There are 8 different classes that you can choose from, and all 8 of those classes have their own unique storyline. And that's pretty amazing. But not only do they have their own unique storyline, but there are different ways that you can progress through that storyline. So, for example, just one of several different examples is that you can choose between light side or dark side or a mix. So you can, kind of lean heavily towards being a good guy or a bad guy. And that's great to have that type of variability because it means replayability. There's absolutely nothing wrong with playing a Jedi from the light side where you're, a goody two-shoes through the whole campaign. But then you have that replayability where you could play through it again as a dark side Jedi, which is quite interesting. And although many aspects of that storytelling are still going to be the same, there's going to be enough variation there that if you allow yourself to kind of get lost in the universe, it will feel like a completely different playthrough in many ways. And then there's other aspects as well. it's not just light side, dark side. You know, you can be a jerk, you can be sarcastic, you can be super nice to people, whatever. You know, there's dialogue choices along the way that kind of allow you to use your own headcanon and make your character, you know, very unique to whatever suits your mood. So I think it's really excellent from that standpoint. The other thing that is really, really excellent at is that all of the quests, all of the quest givers are voice acted. There's not a wall of text. I shouldn't say all. There's a couple of like quests that you can pick up through reading, but through data pads, I guess. But for the most part, almost all of them, and there's lots and lots of quests in this game, they're all voice acted, and they all have cutscenes where you interact with people, and it really just builds up that sort of immersion of playing the game that I've never seen any other MMO do as good of a job of doing. So it's really easy game to kind of get caught up in that aspect as well. And one other aspect of the storytelling that I think is really important to keep in mind, at least in comparison to some of the other MMOs, is this job really makes you understand what your place in the world is, how you are affecting the world around you, and you really feel like an important person really from the opening scene of right after character creation all the way up through completing your class story. At no point are you really just running around, you know, running a beer mug from, you know, one quest giver to another one, you know, in Dune Murrow, for example. Or you're not just saying, you know, go kill 6 of this mob and 8 of that mob, and, you know, who knows exactly why you're doing that. Yes, there are some kill quests. Yes, there are some, you know, some fetch quests. Yes, there are some, you know, take this from one person to another. But they make sense. They're actually in, they're all wrapped up in a story that is cohesive, and they feel important. They don't feel like basically busy work just to give you a little bit of experience in order for you to level up before you get to the good stuff. No, instead, from the moment when, you know, you're a young Padawan in you know, the Jedi Temple on Tython, you already feel like you're fairly exceptional, like you're already doing really important things in the world and in the Jedi Order. The same thing is said, you know, for the Sith storyline, whether you're the smuggler, whether you're the agent, you're actually really a key player in momentous events from the very beginning of your character. And I think that that's something that no other MMO does as well as this one. Many of the planets, the sort of the landscapes, the aesthetics of the different things are very, very cool. You can go to Hoth and, you know, you kind of be transported back to the first scenes of The Empire Strikes Back. And although the graphics are not wonderful, you feel like you're on Hoth. Same thing for Tatooine. You know, pick your favorite planets from the Star Wars universe, and you know, and you can go there and you can experience it firsthand for yourself. And they do a really good job, I think, of capturing that aesthetic. In fact, I would go so far as to say that they do a far better job of capturing that aesthetic than many of the more recent movies in the Star Wars series do. I am a diehard Star Wars original trilogy fan, not so much anything that has come since then. And that's really kind of maybe the final point that I wanted to make when it comes to the storytelling, which is that I think we've seen with recent Star Wars movies that it's not necessarily particularly easy to tell a good Star Wars story. And this game does that. Some of the storylines are better than others, but all of them are absolutely worth experiencing, and none of them are the sort of drivel that we've gotten used to recently with Star Wars. Obviously, in my opinion, you know, no offense to anybody who actually likes the recent movies. I think those of us who grew up with the original ones are probably a little bit jaded when it comes to the newer ones, but I think there's a lot of qualities of the newer ones that are just not particularly great storytelling, but that's a whole different video. Okay, so anyway, I do want to just kind of emphasize how rewarding of an experience this is from a storytelling standpoint. There are other things to like about it, and there, of course, it's a flawed game. There's things to dislike about it. There's what I think is actually a pretty good crafting system in it. Unfortunately, for the most part, if you play the game the way that it's kind of structured right now, there's no real need to engage with the crafting system through most of the game. It becomes a little bit more useful later on in like the end game, but I do regret that they've decided to make the early leveling process, the class missions part of this game, so overly easy, because it really just means you don't have to engage with systems like that. There's group raids, you know, there's flashpoints. A lot of the flashpoints you can do by yourself if you want to, or you can team up with other people. There's, of course, the MMO aspect of this, the multiplayer aspect of this, where you can play with friends, but the game is pretty easy to play even by yourself. I have recently published a video where I talk about the no companion challenge to show how the game is way more interesting to play it without your companion. I regret that the game requires you to do that in order to sort of generate an artificial sense of challenge in the game, but I do think it helps out a lot. Anyway, check out that video if you're at all interested in that. It's the kind of game where I go back and play through the classes multiple times, and so that early game experience, the leveling up, the class missions before you get to end the game, is important to me, and so I think there are other people who would probably like that quality as well, and so there is a way to increase the challenge of it. Just wanted to make that point. All right, anyway, so that's pretty. Now the flaws, yeah, it's too easy. There are still some janky, some clunky aspects of the game. There's a couple places where resources out in the world that you see on your mini-map can't be collected for whatever reason. It's kind of distressing to see that little bugs like that have managed to remain in the game, even though they've been around for a very, very long time. They certainly could have been fixed by now, and they should have been fixed by now. There's a few other things. I recently bumped into a problem with some mission, crafting mission schematic, or not schematics, just, I guess they're just called crafting missions. Anyway, they're not returning rewards correctly. There's a few problems with, there's a bit of jankiness related to the crafting, but overall it still works pretty well. It's not really, like I said, a flawless game by any stretch of the imagination, but the important point that I wanted to stress is that there is a lot of fun to be had here, and I think that sometimes we lose the forest for the trees, where we get caught up in a couple, one or two of the things about something that would give us reason to not like it, and it makes us overlook all of the many great qualities that a game has. That's not true just for this game, but it's true for many other games as well. But I do definitely think it's very true for this one. So basically, I just wanted to get across that I think this is a game, if you missed it, it's worth checking out. It is very much a single-player friendly. A lot of people would argue even that it's mainly a single-player RPG as opposed to an MMO RPG. Like I said, that multiplayer aspect is there if you want to do it with your friends, but you certainly don't have to. You can experience almost everything this game has to offer without even engaging in the multiplayer aspect of it as well. So it's really a very high-quality single-player RPG if that's what you want it to be. And anyway, I want to kind of end here with throwing out there that I would like to hear what other people think of this. I've talked to a fair number of people who I think have quite enjoyed it. There are some valid criticisms of it, but if there's things I've overlooked in this video that you think people should know about, maybe people who have never played it before, they should be aware of before playing this game, then by all means, please leave those in the comments. Also, just let me know whether or not you agree with my overall take on it. It's, 2025 now, and the game is not going to be cutting edge in any way, any form or fashion. But the way that I look at games is basically, is there fun to be had? And if it is, doesn't matter to me if it's dated. I still want to kind of squeeze all the fun out of a game that I possibly can. So I think I'll go ahead and leave it at that. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching and listening. Let me know what your thoughts are, and I will see you all in the next video.
Have a tendency to get carried away.